Oh my God, I touched up now. What?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order the November 6th meeting of the Frederick County Planning Commission. And hopeful that you'll join us in a moment of silence, please. Thank you. There are no changes to the agenda.
Madam Chairman, move for adoption.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. We're quickly into committee reports. I do have a couple listed since our last meeting. Development Review and Regulation, Mr. Unger?
Yes, ma'am. We met October 24th, and we talked about mesh development plan and how it's being handled. And some people was talking about possibly changing it, but we had a lengthy discussion about it, and we felt like it was very important for the neighbors next to whatever was being developed or potential being developed to be aware of what was going on. And also, if we did do away with that, there wouldn't be a public meeting for people, wouldn't be able to come and comment and things like that. So after we talked about it, we decided it would be better off to leave it the way it is, and we're going to go ahead and send it to the Planning Commission Board to see how they feel about that.
Thank you very much. The Transportation Committee, Mr. Oates.
Yes, ma'am. We met October 28th and had 3 items on the agenda. First was a revenue sharing application from Greystone for the construction of Stoughton Bridge Boulevard, the road that 2 different rezonings proffered to build. They're going for a dollar-for-dollar match from the state and requested the application be approved by the Board of Supervisors. The second item was capital improvement plan, the list of roads and such that we normally see every year. It was decided that we're going to break that this year into projects that are funded and unfunded and reset the priorities. So that'll be coming up for us for too much longer. And then the third item was talked about 37. Our next meeting, the Monday before Thanksgiving, we'll be taking a look at the engineering plans for Route 37 all the way around.
Wow. That's great. Super. Thank you. I think we've covered all of ours. We have Jennifer Beatley with us from Winchester. We're glad you're here.
Thank you. Yes, the last Winchester City Planning Commission meeting was held October 15th. At the meeting, the commission approved a conditional use permit for conversion of a ground floor non-residential use to residential use on East Cork Street. We approved a rezoning of 7.7 acres of land on Cedar Creek Road for the Cedar Creek Place project from RO1 district with CE overlay to B2 district with PUD and CE district overlay. We approved an ordinance to amend the Winchester zoning ordinance to change the maximum time limit in which the commission must report a recommendation to City Council from 90 to 100 days. We had 1 administrative approval for the Glaze Phase 2 project on 320 North Cameron Street. And the next Planning Commission meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, November 19th at 3 p.m.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us. Are there any citizen comments regarding anything that's not on the agenda? Seeing none, we will close the citizen comment portion. We have several public hearings to deal with this evening. The first is ordinance amendment to the Frederick County Code, Chapter 165 zoning. I'm going to shorten this up, if you don't mind, and just describe it as these are revisions to the Frederick County zoning ordinance to update the TDR density rights table, including a provision for contiguous lots and an addition of a TDR density conversion rate for receiving properties. Mrs. Perkins.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the Commission. As you stated, these are 3 amendments to the TDR ordinance. First is a density table update. This is really just to reflect the changes to the RP district that were approved back in January. Second, as you stated, contiguous sending properties. And third, the major change is the density right conversion table as applied to receiving properties. Now, note that these are the same amendments that the Planning Commission held a public hearing for at your October 16th meeting, and it was tabled to tonight. So there have been no changes to any of these amendments. So I won't bore you with the same presentation you saw back in October. I would be glad to answer any questions that you may have on this. And It's been through a number of different committees over the past year, DRC as well, Planning Commission and the board. So tonight we're seeking a recommendation from the Planning Commission to forward to the Board of Supervisors. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of Mrs. Perkins? Any? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to these changes? Anyone at all? Sir, if you'll come up to the microphone and give us your name and magisterial district, that'd be great.
Good evening. Madam Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, my name is Bruce Carpenter, and I and my wife Kim are residents, farmers, and rural landowners in the Gainesboro District. I'm also a director with the Frederick County Farm Bureau. The Frederick County Farm Bureau is a membership organization that promotes, educates, and lobbies on behalf of agricultural issues in Frederick County, and is one link in the chain that comprises the Virginia Farm Bureau. We consist of 742 associate member families and 241 agricultural producer families. To be a voting member, you must be actively engaged in agriculture. The 241 producer members we represent are fortunate to control a large portion of the land that could be affected as a sending member of this program and its changes. The Frederick County Farm Bureau completely endorses the proposed amendment before you this evening. Frederick County Farm Bureau has twice passed by unanimous vote a resolution supporting transfer of development rights. We support the proposed changes being presented tonight, which we feel will add value to rural landowners looking to take advantage of this program. We feel it is a valuable tool for the rural landowner who wishes to realize an income from his property without being forced to sell it to the highest bidder as an only alternative. We also feel the proposed changes to the program will not only add value and marketability to the TDRs, but increase the potential success of this valuable wealth management, retirement, and estate planning opportunity. Many rural landowners have looked at the value of their land as their retirement income or inheritance for their heirs. Without alternate avenues such as this program, the only way to capitalize on this asset was to sell. With the proposed changes before you tonight, the TDR program has greater value to not only the seller, but to the potential buyers looking to maximize density and thus hopefully their profits within the urban development areas. Frederick County and its residents can only benefit from the protection of rural land and the way of life that comes with it. This voluntary program is a strong step in guarding for perpetuity, the very essence that makes Frederick County the place I am proud to call home. Please approve with the full support of the Frederick County Farm Bureau and forward this proposed change to the Board of Supervisors for their review and anticipated adoption. Thank you for your service to Frederick County and for allowing me to address you tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Is there anyone else who would like to speak with us about this item? All righty, we will close the public hearing. Any discussion by or any thoughts from the Planning Commission? Any?
I think it's time to move this forward.
Would you like to make a motion?
I move that we recommend approval to the board.
Second.
It's been, the motion is to recommend approval of these ordinance amendments to the board. Mr. Unger?
Unger, yes.
Marston, yes. Ambrogi, yes.
Crockett, yes.
Votes yes.
Thomas, yes.
Triplett, yes. Moon, yes.
And the chair votes yes. This will go to the board on November the 13th. Thank you very much. Our next item is also a public hearing and deals with ordinances, and again, a very long descriptor. And if I could just shorten this up a little bit, these revisions are to increase the maximum height in the EM, extractive manufacturing, M1 and M2 zoning districts with the Board of Supervisors waiver and the addition of the supplementary use regulations. And there are a number of articles that are referenced. Mrs. Perkins.
Again, thank you. These are amendments to increase the height allowance in the EM, M1, and M2 zoning districts through the approval of a Board of Supervisors waiver. Now, the waiver option in front of you tonight would allow the board to determine the appropriateness of a proposed height increase that is requested by an applicant in a certain location, and it also provides the applicant with an irrevocable approval for their request. Now, currently, the height maximum in the EM district is 45 feet, and the height maximums in the M1 and M2 district are both 60 feet. The waiver would allow the board to waive the height in the EM district up to 200 feet, and the M1, M2 districts up to 150 feet. The supplementary use regulations that correspond to the waiver would first be that the architectural renderings would need to be submitted by an applicant. There's a statement that the board can require additional buffer and screening elements if necessary, as well as additional distances if the board deems those necessary to protect adjacent uses. The board can also require additional conditions that may be necessary based on the location. And there's a statement that the waiver cannot be used to permit height increases for signage. So the DRC discussed this back in September. The board discussed this at their October 9th meeting and sent it forward to public hearing. And the commission discussed this in October 16th meeting. So tonight we're seeking a recommendation from the Planning Commission to the Board of Supervisors, and I would be glad to answer any questions.
Questions for Mrs. Perkins on this? Yes, Mr. Oates.
Candace, unlike a CUP, there's no public hearing involved with the waiver, and there's no notification sent to any neighbors.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Thank you very much. Is there anyone in the audience to speak with us regarding this ordinance change? Anyone? Well, seeing no one, we will close the public hearing. Any other comments or discussion from the Planning Commission? It's been with us for a while, and
So my only comment is I wish we'd have increased the base height instead of letting it where it was. But I think this is a very good move, and I like it not being a CUP because it's permanent construction, and putting a CUP on permanent construction is a mistake. So I will move that we recommend to the board approval of height waivers in EM, M1, and M2 districts.
Second.
all right, the motion has been to approve these height ordinance changes. Mr. Moan?
Moan, yes. Trumper, yes.
Thomas, yes.
Oates, yes.
Crockett, yes.
Ambrogi, yes. Marston, yes.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. This also will go to the board on November the 13th.
Madam Chairman, I'll need to recuse myself from the next item.
Thank you, sir. Our next item is a rezoning. It's 1303 of Madison Village, submitted by Painter Lewis PLC to rezone 51.26 acres from RA Rural Areas District to 46.26 acres of RP Residential Performance and 5 acres of B2 General Business District with proffers. The property is located on the west side of Route 522, Front Royal Pike, approximately 1,000 feet south of the intersection of Route 522, Front Royal Pike, and Route 645 Airport Road, and is in the Shawnee Magisterial District. Mr. Ruddy.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. This rezoning request was in front of you approximately 90 days ago. As you recall, at that time, the Planning Commission tabled the request because of a variety of reasons, primarily to enable the public hearing notification and sign to be on the property for the sufficient amount of time. 2 items during the Planning Commission meeting were identified by staff that addressed potential impacts. And there was also a lot of discussion about the applicant and the adjacent property owner getting together to meet and work out, discuss some outstanding issues that were occurring between the 2 property owners. For orientation, of course, a reminder if anybody's paying attention and watching at home, the property is located on 522 South, and you can see from the exhibit that there's residential property to the north, across 522 and to the south. As the property fits into the general area, it's just south of the Russell 150 project, and there's a road connections in and adjacent to this project. The generalized development plan that's on your screen to your left is, of course, the exhibit that guides the development to this property. And, of course, it shows the areas of B2 adjacent to 522, and it shows the balance of the residential land uses. Generally speaking, the applicant has made some modifications to their rezoning application to address the 2 items that were identified. The The proffer statement dated September the 5th included a minimum number of units, 420, which provides a base density of about 8 units an acre. They also established timing for the road connections to the adjacent property, both to the west and to the south, as was suggested previously. Of course, we recognize that access to the property to the north, the Russell 150 property, and the Shepherd property to the north and northeast remains with the initial phase of the development. At this time, we know that the applicant and the adjacent property owner have met and had several discussions, but no agreement is in place at this time. I'm sure the applicant and the adjacent property owner would add further to that if they feel need this evening. So with that, we would recognize that the RP B2 zoning designations are consistent with the goals of the comprehensive plan in the Sense and Eastern Frederick Urban Area Plan, and that the potential impacts have been addressed with the proffer statement, and more particularly with the revision dated September the 5th of 2013. So this evening we're seeking a recommendation of the Planning Commission to the Board of Supervisors. I'd be happy to answer any questions that may be lingering for the Planning Commission, but also to recognize that the applicant is here this evening, as is the adjacent property owner, if you have any questions of them.
Any questions for Mr. Ruddy?
Just one.
Yes.
Mike, as you said, I think 90 days ago when we previously bet on this pretty well meets all the requirements of the county's comprehensive plan. It's in compliance.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else? Question? I know that the original application had a number of different types of residential units. Do we have that same array before us potentially now, still?
Yes, ma'am. The minimum number of units, of course, as I mentioned, has been established at 420. The maximum by proffer is 640. The numbers that have been provided to offset the impacts on various capital facilities, they reflect both the single-family detached, attached, and multifamily housing types.
How about for, I don't want to say the older folk. That was included in the last one as well. I qualify.
Of course, that flexibility still remains in the proffer statement, yes.
All right. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Sir. Would the applicant like to address this?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the commission. I'm John Lewis with Painter Lewis, and along with Mr. Ben Butler, I'm here to represent the project tonight. Since the public hearing last August, we've worked on 4 issues that were raised by the Planning Commission. The first issue was regarding the minimum density, and Mike has addressed that. We have placed in the proffer statement a minimum density so that we are going to be in conformance with the comprehensive plan, as well as a maximum density. The second is the question of timing of the construction of the internal roads, and again, Mike has covered that, and our internal road construction is spelled out in the proffers and tied to the different phases of the project. Third issue was the sign, which disappeared last time, but we reposted it soon after the meeting last August, and it remains to this day in its spot. So it has been posted since August. I haven't checked it tonight, but it was there yesterday. The fourth issue is obtaining a grading easement to facilitate the construction of our entrance from 522. This issue has not been resolved with the adjacent neighbor. We require a grading easement in order to construct the proposed entrance location. I will say that 2 draft agreements have been exchanged, but no resolution has come. It is incumbent upon the applicant, though, to reach an agreement in order for this project to move forward. And I would request that the Planning Commission forward a favorable response to the Board of Supervisors on the application in its current state. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Questions for Mr. Lewis? Any? Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak to this proposal? Anyone? Yes, sir. Come up and give us your name and magisterial district, please.
Good evening. My name is Michael Shepard, and I live in the Shawnee Magisterial District. My wife and I own 2 lots, Zone B2, adjacent to the Madison 2 project, which is to our south and west, and the Russell 150 project is to our north. I was here in August when the issue was tabled to allow discussions on access and easements between Madison and my wife and I. I'm simply here tonight to tell you that no final agreement has been reached. We have, prior to the last Planning Commission meeting, filed our site plan with the county. And at this point, we're prepared to move forward with our plan. We're not against Madison rezoning as a practical matter, but the outstanding issue is that I really don't understand how their road can go in without the grading easements and with our buildings as close to the edge of our property as our site plans show now. I guess that's all I have to say, just to give you an update as to where we stand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shepard. Anyone else speak to us regarding this? Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing. We have any further items that we don't see have been solved, other than the one that's just been raised?
I think Roger might have.
I'd like to ask staff a question. Is it possible to build this development without having that entrance and the grading easement?
Yes.
Is there another access, or?
There are certainly other accesses, and I know the applicant has looked at a variety of different ways of actually achieving it, moving the entrance, additional improvements in Route 522. So practically, there may be alternative ways to access this development or even construct this road. But it would appear as though the obvious one is as has been initially designed, and I'm sure that the intention would be that the parties would work together and come to some agreement where it could actually be put in place. I think an adjacent project a little further south, for a little bit of history, was the Freedom Manor project, and that was a residential rezoning that required the construction of a state road out to Route 522. And in that case, the rezoning, of course, was approved, recognizing it was an appropriate rezoning, but improvements did have to be made that weren't guaranteed at that particular moment. Perhaps a similar situation where we recognize that this project is probably an appropriate project in the right place. Details associated with the development do need to be worked out, and that will need to happen before the development moves forward, whether that is in as originally designed or some modification of that, either to the access road or improvements to 522.
Any other comments? Comments?
Motion? Oh,
Well, before we have a motion, I have I guess a question for ourselves to think about. Should we put a restriction on this that no construction can start until we have a VDOT-approved entrance? Or should we just go ahead and move it forward and assume that VDOT will not allow construction to start until we have a VDOT-approved entrance? Which would be the most appropriate way to push this forward? John, I missed seeing you over there. I'd have asked you that question.
And you're correct. VDOT's not going to let them operate in their right-of-way prior to any design being approved. They would never issue the permit that they would need to construct the entrance. So if they got into that particular bind, they would have to find an alternative or else not move forward.
So they could actually work on the residential site to commercial sites, but then before they could actually make the connection to 522, They would have to satisfy the VDOT requirements.
Yeah, they would have to have that approval.
And we don't need to put any restrictions in a motion or recommendation to,
VDOT's a lot more lenient when it comes to like a construction entrance or that sort of thing, and they could get that. But as far as any kind of final real entrance, they wouldn't be able to do anything without a VDOT approval on that, which has a much higher standard.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Answers my question.
I'd recommend approval of 0-13. It complies with our comprehensive plan. They've complied with all state, local ordinances and other requirements. So I'd move that we recommend approval to the board.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
I guess I don't understand what's going on. Are we going to landlock somebody because they can't get in and out now because of this? Because if it's so, we should get it resolved before we send this on. And that's what it sounds like to me.
Well, I think, from my perception of what's going to happen, they're not going to be able to build the entrance and do the grading. So the other lots won't be landlocked until they get an agreement, because they have to get a grading easement on Mr. Shepherd's property to be able to build the entrance. If they don't have that agreement, there's no entrance, unless they come up with a different entrance.
But the two parties haven't agreed.
We can't hold it up.
In other words, if they bring an easement into this project, can he still get into his property off the other people's land?
They can't get an easement from him unless they come to an agreement. They can't build the entrance.
But your property comes to 522, fronts 522.
Yes, sir.
So they're not going to be landlocked because they can get on to 522 regardless of whether
They can't put two entrances in, though. They got to use that entrance.
but you can't use landlocked as a
It's
word
not
here
landlocked,
because it
but they
won't
can't
be.
get into it, though.
I think bottom line is, unless they come to an agreement, there's probably not going to be a project.
Right.
Exactly right.
That's right.
So it's really out of our hands. It's in two private citizens or property owners, and if they don't play nice with each other, neither one of them will benefit.
Well, and I think from our obligation too, in terms of the application materials and what's proffered,
Exactly.
the general development plan does provide shows the locations where those access points should be provided to ensure that there's that interconnectivity. But it's incumbent upon the two owners to work out a mutually agreeable arrangement to facilitate that. And I mean, and that is, in my mind, a private element. I mean, we've done what we can do and should do, and I think staff as well, to ensure that the framework is there. So, I mean, personally, I'm comfortable with that, but, obviously they have additional work to do.
I am also.
Okay.
Okay? Okay. We have a motion on the floor. Let's proceed to vote. Mr. Moan?
Moan, yes.
Triplett, yes.
Thomas, yes.
Crockett, yes.
Ambrogi, yes.
Marston, yes.
Unger, yes.
And the chair votes yes. This will go to the Board of Supervisors on the 11th of November. Our next item is an action item. It's a waiver for the Carmouze Company. It's a request from Lawson and Silik on behalf of this company to allow the construction of a 193-foot tall kiln on the existing Clearbrook Quarry located off Quarry Lane in the Stonewall Magisterial District. Mrs. Perkins.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is a waiver request that staff received on behalf of Carmouze Lime. It was submitted by Lawson and Silik to construct a kiln at the existing quarry facility in Clearbrook in the Stonewall Magisterial District. Now, note that the waiver is for the construction of a kiln with the skin up to 200 feet in height. I would note that that your agenda did say 193, but the kiln's a little taller, and for add a little more flexibility, the request is actually for 200 feet. I just want to clarify that. This is an architectural rendering submitted by the applicant of the proposed kiln with what is called the skin, which is that gray portion at the top. This is a location map of the area. So it'll let me draw on this picture. The kiln is going to be located in this area up here. You have 81 in this location and Route 11, and then there was a site plan that showed a little more blown up of where the kiln structure is going to be located. It's not working with me here. I apologize. These are some photographs submitted by the applicant of what the structure will look like. And some simulations from background of,
Would you go back? What is the relative dimensions at the top? It's hard to tell.
I'd have to defer to the applicant on the dimensions of the structure. These are just some graphics of the same structure located in another area. So really, just to sum it up, we're seeking a recommendation from the Planning Commission to the Board of Supervisors on the requested waiver for Carmoose Line for a kiln up to 200 feet in height at the Clearbrook facility. It would be appropriate for any recommendations forwarded to the board to include the requirement that the kiln have what is being called the skin on it. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have. The applicant, Mr. Ty Lawson, is here on behalf of the application, and we also have Patrick Barker with the EDC here tonight as well. I'd be glad to answer your questions.
Questions of Mrs. Perkins?
Thank you.
Mr. Lawson? There you are.
Ty Lawson here on behalf of Carmoose. I'd be happy to respond to questions, but Roger, it appears that in the packet, the top is 193 feet, 3 inches and a quarter.
That's the height. I was the.
Oh, I'm sorry, the actual width. We don't have that dimension. I could get that, I suppose, but we don't have that in the packet. We've been so focused on the height, frankly.
For just a scalable, size, I was trying to, 20 feet, 30 feet. It probably looks like it's probably around the range of 20 feet.
It is certainly skinny, narrow, and tall, and as we've discussed numerous times, it's a combination of silos and exhaust, and this is to enclose the top portion of that.
Is that what you called the skin?
Yes, it could be built without it. The company believes that it's more attractive. It hides a lot of the stuff that you see from a distance, and not to draw too many comparisons, but what you see at S-Rock up in Martinsburg, which is 437 feet, so it's off the charts in terms of scale. There is no skin on that, and frankly, we think it's less attractive than what this will be. It also cuts down on noise, which is nice for neighbors.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you all.
Great. This is an action item for us. It's a recommendation of a waiver, or the board actually makes it, but it'll be, should make a recommendation to them. And it is 200 feet, Candace?
I think this is a good project for the county. I think it, there's certainly, some people going to like it, some people going to dislike it, but I think it's in a location where it's appropriate, the height's appropriate. So I certainly don't have any problem with it. I think we ought to move it forward, but it's not in my district, so.
Madam Chair, I just did want to point out that Clearbrook Fire and Rescue does advise that the operational height on their ladder truck is only 85 feet. But with that, I'd like to move to approve Carmoose Lime and Stone for a kiln with skin at their Clearbrook facility not to exceed 200 feet in height. Did I get everything in there, Eric?
Is there a second?
Second.
All righty. Any other discussion? Mr. Unger?
Yes.
Marston, yes.
Ambrogi, yes.
Crockett, yes.
Oates, yes.
Thomas, yes.
Triplett, yes.
Moon, yes.
And the chair votes yes. This will go to the board on November the 13th. The last item is information and discussion item for the commission. It's Master Development Plan 03-13 for the towns at Tasker, submitted by Pannoni Associates to develop a 49-unit townhouse development. The subject property is located on the east side of Route 642, Tasker Road, and north of Route 846, Rutherford Lane, approximately 0.7 of a mile south of the I-81 interchange 310, and is in the Shawnee Magisterial District. Mrs. Perkins.
Again, thank you. I just wanted to note, first off, there's a revised master development plan in front of you tonight. I highlighted the changes for you. It includes a minor acreage change due to a boundary line adjustment that the applicant is proposing to do, as well as a minor sidewalk change. So I just wanted to point that out. So this is a master plan to develop 10.2 acres, which is the adjusted acreage of land that is zoned RA, rural areas, with a total of 49 townhouse units. As you stated, it's at the corner of Tasker Road and Rutherford Lane in the Shawnee District. This is a location map for the property. You have 81, as well as Tasker Road and Rutherford Lane. It's kind of that triangular shaped property. The subject property is located within the urban development area and the sewer water service area, and the 2030 comprehensive plan shows the property with the residential land use designation. The towns at Tasker is proposed to be accessed via one full entrance on Tasker Road, which you can see on the master plan in front of you. Now, I would also note that this subject property is being utilized as a transfer of development rights, or TDR, receiving property, and will be developed to the RP standards as far as density and development standards. The property will be utilizing 49 transferred rights from 4 parcels that are located off Cedar Creek Grade and Hunting Ridge Road that are located in the county's sending areas. The applicant currently has the TDR rights to develop those 49 units, and the remainder of the site, which I also highlighted on the plan in front of you, it's shown as future development area, could be developed through additional transferred rights or a rezoning, whichever the applicant chose to do in the future. Now, note this is the first property to utilize the TDR ordinance. Now, this is the master plan that you have in front of you. It shows the access point, the circular loop road for the property, and all of the buffers, and the rec units, and the sidewalks. So, excuse me. And that concludes the presentation for my portion. I'm going to turn it over to John Bishop. He's going to talk a little bit about the transportation side of it. And at our conclusion, Mr. Ron Maslowski with Pannoni Associates is here on behalf of the application, should you have questions for him.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. I'll be brief. Frankly, I probably wouldn't be up here if we hadn't received a few questions about the entrance that's being proposed. So we're just trying to be a little proactive with addressing that. As I noted, we have received some questions and concerns regarding the entrance. Frankly, both we and VDOT have urged the applicant to relocate it to Rutherford Lane. They've opted not to do that. Neither we nor VDOT has the authority to make them move it to Rutherford Lane because VDOT entrance spacing can be met. Now, the entrance is not yet designed because they also have to meet other VDOT criteria such as sight distance and certain turn lanes and things like that, but they are deep in that process, and there's been a fair amount of back and forth between the applicant and VDOT as they work to come up with an approvable entrance under VDOT standards. But just wanted to put that out there because that's something I've been asked about personally, so we're throwing that out.
Thank you.
I can take any questions you may have as well.
Anybody have questions?
Yes, sir.
Not exactly sure where to start, but it's going to have one entrance in and out.
Yes, sir.
That entrance right now, if they put it where they show it, I have no idea how they're going to get the sight distances for the vertical curve that comes down off that hill. But what kind of a service degradation are we looking at on the road there? Because this is going to add in, I mean, at one entrance, the trips per day coming out of there, the backup from the light doesn't quite get to there yet, but once you have these residents, and they're probably going to come out and go right up the hill, the backup from the light up at 37 will probably now make it back down to this entrance.
It gets pretty far.
It's going to be a,
I've seen it this far, if not nearly this far. It's certainly an issue. Unfortunately, this development is not one that meets the threshold where we can require a TIA to where I could answer you clearly on that back of queue information. Now, they are putting in left turn lane, so it would depend on that sort of thing. My greater concern probably comes from people trying to exit this development as opposed to getting in. I think getting in's being relatively dealt with to the extent that they can with the turn lanes and things like that. But getting out's going to be a problem. And where that creates a problem for, frankly, you all and board members and me, frankly, down the road is when these people get moved in and become tax-paying citizens and start having trouble getting out of their development. We're the ones they call and say, well, we need a signal and everything, and that's where your real degradations start to come in as well.
I know that's posted 45 miles an hour, and there might be 5% of the cars that go down that hill at 45 miles an hour, but that is not going to be a safe entrance.
No, I can't disagrey with you there. Well, you know that. We've talked about that.
Any other questions, Mr. Bishop? Yes, Mr. Unger.
John,
Yes, sir.
where does VDOT want them to move the entrance at? Can you show me with a pointer?
I don't believe VDOT has made a specific location, but basically to try and take advantage of Rutherford Lane, you probably still wouldn't have a wonderful spacing, especially with this boundary line adjustment they're doing. But they do have an area in there where they could still shoehorn an entrance in, and it would still be better than the direct entrance onto Tasker, in our opinion.
It would be better.
Yes.
Anyone else? Mr. Oates?
I have a question for Ms. Perkins.
Yes, sir.
Candace, on the TDR rights, are they doing this based on the new ones that are coming through right now, or is this on the old?
This is under the old one.
Okay, so if they would have held off and used the newer ones, they wouldn't have had to transfer so many development rights in for townhouses?
And there's a potential, if the ordinance is passed, they could come back through with a revised master plan.
Okay. Thanks.
This discussion has come from a long way around. I mean, when we started it, it didn't talk about another entrance at a point where it wouldn't be so onerous. And we talked about Rutherford Lane, and now we have something new. So I'm hopeful that while this is commission discussion, I'd like to ask Mr. Moslowski if he'd come up and discuss this with us, please.
Good evening, members of the Commission. Ron Moslowski, Pinoni Associates. I'm here representing the application. First, I want to say that VDOT has certain requirements spelled out in the road design manual for site distance, and there's calculations done that you use to determine whether turn lanes are required and how long those turn lanes need to be. And this entrance meets all those requirements. We did originally try to get an entrance off of Rutherford Lane, but VDOT, the same improvements would have to be done since we're adding the same number of trips to Tasker Road. The same improvements would have had to been done down at Rutherford Lane and would have meant a couple things. One, there's a large power pole on the northeast corner of the Rutherford Tasker Road intersection, and VDOT wanted us to straighten out that intersection. And so that added a far more complex condition to the design than what the commercial entrance we show now is. Additionally, the widening would have extended across the box culvert that carries a Pecking Creek under Tasker Road, which would have meant lengthening that culvert. So the last thing is the entrance on Rutherford Lane would have been roughly 30 feet lower than where the site is right now. So back when we were doing that drill, VDOT actually told us that a previous applicant had come in and they had approved an entrance on where this location is on Tasker Road a few years prior to this. And so, and they told us that because the entrance does meet the site distance requirements that VDOT specifies for the road. We are, there's been some question about which entrance is better and which one isn't. We are fairly confident that we can get this entrance approved by VDOT. And so, but it meets all the requirements. I'm not sure what else we can be asked to do.
So we're giving up safety for money, essentially.
I would argue that if the entrance meets VDOT requirements, that it is a safe entrance, or else the VDOT requirements would need to be revised. Have you been down the road since it's been lowered, since the site's been lowered?
I was down the road last night.
You can see all the way around that curve right now, where you could not see it before. And in fact, the curve used to appear a lot steeper when you couldn't see around it, and now it looks almost gradual. So I've been, well, it's not, it is a curve through there, but the site distance, you can see that the site distance is achievable now that the site's been cut down. But I'd be happy to answer any more questions. We are using TDRs, and in all, we probably will come back with revised master plans as the TDR condition changes. And Mr. Holliday is also working on getting more TDRs to fully build out the site.
Entrance?
Same entrance, yes, ma'am. All the studies have been done for a total of 80 townhouses. The design, there's a site plan now being reviewed by VDOT and all the other agencies that shows a maximum of 80 townhouses. And the calculations on the entrance were done assuming the trips from 80 townhouses.
Okay, any other comments? Yes, Mr. Unger?
Just thinking about that entrance, if that entrance meets the requirements, to me, it would be hard to turn down. And what if their land didn't run down to that other road anyway? They'd still have to come out there. So if they're meeting the requirements, I don't see what else you can do.
Well, our role this evening is to take a look at a master development plan. And that will be the same thing that the board will do.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you all.
I agree that it potentially can meet the requirements. However, requirements are made for general situations, and this has some unique aspects. It already has a significant traffic problem turning left off of this onto 37 and 81 at the light. And the speed conditions, I think VDOT's going to have to reevaluate the posted speed limit and then actually enforce it. Because that, like I said, very few people travel 45 miles an hour on that section of road. But
I probably wouldn't disagree with you on the speed limit, but that's nothing that they can do about.
No.
We have seen and we have made comment. Does that sum it up? Yes. Okay, thank you. If there are no more comments, we've come to the end of our agenda. And so unless we'd like to keep on keeping on, we would look.
Next meeting?
Oh, yes. We have to cancel our next meeting. Thank you, sir.
Madam Chair, move we cancel the next meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, now,
Move for adjournment.
Second.
all in favor? All opposed? Thank you.